Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is the Brave New Money series review of Sire and Sire Coin. So, before we get started, we'd just like to talk a little bit about what we're going to cover in this review. Firstly, we're going to go into obviously what is Sire and Sire Coin. How does decentralized cloud storage actually work with Sire? How do you set up decentralized cloud storage with Sire? Why the hell can't I withdraw my Sire coin from Poloniex or Bitrex? Of course, I can actually withdraw it, but that is a reference to an issue that has been had by many over the last month or so, and we will get into that and give you a status update. And a final assessment and review of Sire according to a basic template that I'm going to use as part of the Brave New Money series. Before I go any further, it's important to emphasize that this video is designed to provide information and opinion on specific subjects and should not under any circumstances be considered as financial advice or recommendations by any individual. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at the website. This is the Sire website you can see now. Sire was launched in June 2015 by David Vorick and Luke Champagne of Nebulous Inc. The website looks pretty good, as you can see. Gives you a bit of an introduction on here on basically what Sire does. So Sirecoin is basically an open source, decentralized cloud storage exchange. And the core of Sire is Sirecoin. So you can use Sirecoin to either rent digital storage, or if you have extra disk storage yourself, you can rent or host that storage out and get paid in Sirecoin. It emphasizes decentralization and private, safe or secure digital storage. Goes into a bit of detail here about how Sire splits apart your files essentially into tiny files and spreads them all over a decentralized network. You hold your own keys, so you've got control of your own data. Think like Google Drive or Dropbox, but with a blockchain and cryptocurrency. One of the big selling points of Sire is its marketing itself is far cheaper than something like Google or Amazon. They say here on average 10 times less expensive. So we'll see if that pans out or not. Again, Sire's very much in its infancy, so there's not a whole lot of people actually hosting space, but there are a few, and you can actually rent storage right now, and I'll actually show you how that's done in a minute. It claims to be highly redundant, so it basically says that it spreads your files out over dozens and dozens of nodes and eliminates any single point of failure by duplicating these files. Sire is open source, so people can contribute to it, and it makes that a fairly strong emphasis. And obviously, it's built on a blockchain. So before we go any further, let's take a quick look at the recent price history and fundamentals. So go over to crypto market cap. You can see here, this is the all-time chart for Sire. It's gone up a lot in the past 3 months or so, 2 or 3 months. It took a big rise up here and then a dip down when Bitcoin took that hit, and everything else just about took that hit, going back about 4 weeks, May 27th, and then since then it's gone back up again. At the moment, it's sitting at about 1.5 US cents, I believe. You can see there about 1.5 US cents per Sire coin. The market cap, first I'll just flick over to different exchanges. So quite a few exchanges you can get them at. I bought mine at Poloniex, where I had the issues with drawing them off, but I'll talk about that later as well. But there's a fair few exchanges here. Bitrex and Poloniex, the biggest ones, that you can get Sire. If you deal in Chinese yuan, you can get them at Yunbi as well. I haven't used that site myself. We take a quick look at where Sire is in the market caps. And it rose significantly going back about a month ago, since at number 17 at the moment. Current price there. And it's been fluctuating. I bought mine at about half of that, probably about 4 weeks ago. And it's got up to around that pretty quickly and then stayed there for the last couple of weeks. All right, let's move on to how to get started in Sire Coin. So, like most things, the first thing you have to do is actually download the GUI, as it shows you here. So we can click over here. Good thing is it's got UIs or applications for all the major operating systems. I'm on the Mac here, so I've downloaded the Mac OS version and set it up. There's a fair few downloads here. So you've got Sire daemons, which are good. So if you're a developer, you want to interact with the program, you can get a daemon here. Further down, some mining programs and a few add-on apps, I guess you'd call them. We'll take a look at Sire Pulse later, which is a cool little website with a bunch of tools, and there's a few other things here as well as the Block Explorer, which is a good spot just to get a one-time view of what's going on with the whole blockchain. Okay, so you can see I've got mine installed here already. When you do first open it, you'll have to let it synchronize. You can't do anything with Sire unless you've synchronized it with the blockchain. That can take a while. I think when I first did it, it might have taken maybe 3 or 4 hours in total. Apparently it can take up to a day, depends on the internet connection and so forth, state of the network. You will also need to actually buy Sire coin in order to do anything at all, really. So it's a pretty simple interface. I actually quite like it now that I've used it a little bit. It's fairly straightforward. I'm going to run through a few things here for renting and hosting. So in order to do anything, you obviously need some Sire coin in here. If you want to transfer some Sire coin, click over to the Receive Sire coin link here. Click on that. You'll get your wallet address up. Obviously, I'm not going to show that on the video. And you can use that to transfer your Sire coin into. Once you've received that, you are able to start thinking about creating an allowance. So an allowance really is the first step in renting cloud storage space. If we have a quick look at this, we can see, as you can see here, buy storage on the Sire Decentralised network. And you need to allocate a block of funds, basically. Now, the important thing to realize is, even though you might allocate something like 2,000 Sire, which is a lot, most likely you won't spend that much, and if you don't spend it, you will get back everything you don't spend. A lot in there, so I've got 2,000. I think I allocated 1,000 a few days ago, and that was an estimated storage of 3 terabytes. Now, in reality, I'm probably not going to use anything like that. I'm only going to probably use a few megs because I'm really just testing it at this stage. But I'll show you what that actually costs, and it's nowhere near the 1,000 Sire coin that you see there. And that's over a 3-month period. So, but once you're happy with that, hit accept. The Sire coin will be uploaded, and your wallet will start to fish for contracts. You can see here I've got 50 contracts up here. Takes a little time, but what it's basically doing is finding a whole bunch of contracts that you can enter into and committing some of your funds to each of those contracts as prepayments. Now, if you don't actually use those contracts to store data, you will receive that money back. And this is a way that Sire uses to make sure that people renting space actually pay for that space if they use it, because your money has already been committed. It's quite a good feature, and it really eliminates the risk of the renter taking the storage and then not being able to pay for it. Really no different to Google Drive or other major cloud storage providers. So while we're here, I'll quickly show you transactions here. So this was when I committed my 1,000 Sire coin. It entered those 50 contracts you see, and these are the transactions that you can see. You can see 11 Sire coin, 13 Sire coin, each of those are prepayments on data storage, basically. So once we've got contracts set up, we can go ahead and add files. So up here, the link to upload folder. I'm going to upload my Civilization 5 configurations folder, not for any particular purpose, just as a demonstration. So here, confirm the upload, yes, upload those, and those file transfers are now taking place. So it shows up there, a whole bunch of configuration settings for Civ 5. And that's in process now. So the speed at which that happens is going to depend on the internet connection and the network connectivity with the host. I think there's a little progress bar here that's going to come along as well. So we'll let that go for the meantime. So as far as renting storage space goes, one of the important things, as I said before, all unspent renters' money are refunded at the end. Now it looked like I actually put a fair bit of Coin in there, and I did, 1,000. It says I've already spent or committed 391. But unless I use about 3 terabytes of space, I'm not likely to use anywhere near that over that time. There is quite a good site here for having a look at the current prices of storage rental. So if I hop over to SEA Pulse here, it's a really good little tool. You can get to this on the website. It's got a bunch of little utilities on it. Put in your 100 gigabytes at the current price comes up at 9 Coin a month to rent, which is very cheap. That's the cheapest price you'll get, and there are different contracts that are more expensive than that, but that gives you a rough idea on what sort of Coin you might spend renting 100 gigabytes. You can put in here, for instance, 1 terabyte. Oops, the 1 terabyte would be about 86 Coin a month. So it's not 100% accurate, this I don't think, but it gives you a rough idea on what you can plan. You can see there before I actually bought 3 terabytes. Well, I didn't buy 3 terabytes, but I set up an allowance aiming for around 3 terabytes. And that committed 391 Coin for me. This quote's 258, so around about that mark. Okay, so let's move on to hosting. Get the hosting up here. And you can see here the basic hosting settings. I'm not actually going to set up hosting today, but we will run through some of these settings. So we just activate hosting there, press accept. Now you can see there the maximum duration of the contracts, the collateral that you're prepared to offer up per month. Now the way that works is you're basically committing those funds in case you lose the files or your system isn't available, and in that case you risk those funds basically. Then obviously your price per terabyte and your bandwidth price for uploading and downloading. I'm just going to deactivate that before I commit to something. And that's pretty much how hosting works. So I will actually make a video down the track that demonstrates hosting and shows exactly how to set it up and how it works, and runs through what sort of Coin you can generate. There is a good site on SEA Pulse that runs through how much money's been made. To get an idea on what sort of money people are currently making from hosting, we can go back to the SEA Pulse here. So you can see here current price for hosting. Again, this is just an earnings calculator basically. You can put in what prices you want to charge. Maybe you want to charge 30 Coin a month. You've got 1 terabyte storage. That price ratio is just the price you're going to charge compared to the current average storage price. Utilization ratio is how much of your storage is will actually get used. So if you believe, if it gets 0.5 usage, then it's going to calculate it on that basis. Estimated utilized storage will be 0.5 terabyte, and you'll make that much Coin per month, which is not really that much at all. It's a fairly small amount. So there's a few considerations here, but obviously this is just the beginning for this this application, so that will go up over time. The way this is tracked is basically on a very regular basis, the blockchain will verify, or there's particular nodes, I think they are called, that will verify that you have the files you've been contracted to store. So what happens is when the files are uploaded, they're basically broken into tiny 64-byte segments, I think it is, and the blockchain knows what these are and will pick one of these at random from the contract and essentially ask the hoster to verify they still have that 64-byte file. And you need to prove you have that file, as well as you provide an additional proof as well. And a couple of other items to remember are that, generally speaking, the contracts will be for 3 months. For people renting storage, you need to have your machines turned on at the 6-week mark when the contracts are refilled or reset. For people who are actually providing the storage, they need to have their machines on for 24 hours a day throughout the whole period of the contract. Usually there are no fees for standard contracts. Now, I've read that in the documentation a few times. According to their latest update, that might change shortly. They may be looking at a system where people can choose to put fees on contracts in order to prioritize those contracts being filled down the track. So on the Sire Explorer here, you can see the current status for a few different parts. We put in the estimated total file contract size of 176 terabytes. Gone up from about 100 terabytes about a month or 6 weeks ago. So usage is increasing as time goes on, and that's been correlated with the increase in price recently as well. Okay, one of the things I really do like about Sire is the amount of resources and development planning and communication going on between the developers and the community itself. As I said before, Sire is run by Nebulous Incorporated, and they've done a pretty good job here. One of the best resources is the wiki. Really good information on here, including links to the blogs, forums, hosting, renting, contracts. So without getting right down into the weeds, this is a pretty good resource with most of the technical details you're likely to need in order to form a decision about whether you want to buy Sire, rent storage, invest, or whatever. So the blog is also a really good source for information. It's actually used on a relatively regular basis. Looking at the blog here brings me to one of the issues recently with Sire that has been a real problem for the people who have bought some Sire, and that was some issues with Polynex and Bittrex and not being able to withdraw funds from those exchanges. So I had this problem myself. I bought a few thousand Sire coin about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and probably for about 3 weeks, well, 2 or 3 weeks, I couldn't actually withdraw off Polynex. Didn't bother me too much at the time. It's kind of a bit of a part of the environment, really, with cryptocurrencies. However, one of the good things to see was that the developers themselves actually addressed this in a recent blog. They pretty much accepted responsibility for this and attributed the problems down to the transaction pool. So the transaction pool is a place where all the pending transactions are stored. Nodes will then pick one of those transactions in order to verify it. Now, that transaction pool was 2 megabytes in size, or could store 2 megabytes worth of transactions. When the number of transactions increased significantly throughout May, what happened was that transaction pool was filling up and transactions were basically dropping off and not being verified and therefore not going through. For that reason, the Polynex and Bittrex basically cancelled withdrawals. So, I mean, it's not great that that should happen. I feel like the developers probably should have foreseen that issue. But to their credit, they did take responsibility. They admit that it was their fault You see this in the blog here. This is our fault. Why they made the decision to keep it at 2 megs. They talk about their market cap going from 30 million up to 400 million by early June as a result of a significant increase in usage, and how they responded to those problems. So it sounds like the issue with Bittrex was not that bad. They got that fixed up within a couple of days. However, Polynex went on for a little while, and the problem was supposed to be fixed, and it went back down again. This is what I experienced as well. Having said that, the issues are now fixed. I withdrew my SI coin about 4 or 5 days ago. It took about 20 minutes to get into the transaction pool, and then, or to get into the, to begin being verified. The blockchain takes about 10 minutes. The transactions take about 10 minutes to verify on Sicoin, and so after about 40 minutes, I think I had my funds sitting in my application. It's also good to see in this blog called Growing Pains, they also talk about a whole bunch of measures they're taking to rectify the problems they experienced here, including increasing the transaction pool, adding logging to keep track of issues when they occur, and so forth. So there's some good information in there if you want to know what that problem was about and how they're trying to fix it. Something else I like about Sire is they are producing now 3 monthly update blogs, which are really informative as well. So the first one of these come out in April, so expect another one in about 4 weeks or so. And some really good information here. It's great that the developers are pushing this stuff out. They talk about the next update, which is coming out in late June, which is 1.3.9, and a bunch of new features that should be available in that update. And there's some pretty exciting stuff in there, actually. So one of the things that I took note of was the collaboration with Nextcloud. Nextcloud is kind of like a Dropbox or a Google Drive service, but just a lesser known one. So they are going to integrate with Sire so that you'll be able to add a Sire folder to your Nextcloud account for cloud storage. Basically gives you another way to use Sire cloud storage other than just through the Sire application itself. Another exciting development is the Mindbox pre-release. So you can pre-purchase these Mindboxes now. They're basically NAS devices that are, they say here, tightly integrated with Sire. They've launched their pre-sale, so think about really just a couple of hard drives in a box that sits on the network. It will probably have, I would imagine, a Sire app running on the NAS, and you'll be able to both host storage on the Sire network as well as use it for your own storage as well. So it's a way to really maximize what you do with your excess storage capacity. So that sounds pretty cool. Again, you do not need one of these in order to use Sire storage. You can simply add a folder from your existing hard drive or a NAS device you've got. You really just need hard disk space to use Sire and for your machine to stay on and your network to be available. They talk about expansions to the network here, so they say that they currently have 100 terabytes of file contracts. This is from a month or so ago. That's now 176 terabytes that we saw on the Blockchain Explorer before, and a total capacity of almost 1 petabyte. So, I mean, this is something that I think people should be asking questions about. 1 petabyte sounds like a lot, but at the current rates, they could reach that within a number of months, or even 12 months. So, what are their plans to go beyond that? It would be pretty disappointing if they got to, fill up a petabyte worth of file contracts and then had to stop growth because they hadn't scaled their capacity up beyond that. So it'll be interesting to see, and that's something I think I'm going to ask through the Slack channel, is what are the plans for expansion beyond that capacity. One of the other really cool things I liked was the plans for, in the next update, for you to be able to do automatic file repair. So where you've got some data being stored and that hoster falls over, deletes your files, isn't available, you can automatically repair those files. I would imagine through some sort of redundancy process where different files are stored in more than one location at a particular time. But Sire have really identified that as one of the key features they require in order to be able to compete with the big cloud storage providers like Google and Amazon. So that's pretty cool. I think it's good that they're aiming to provide a A-grade service from the beginning. It's going to take a while to get there, of course, but they've got those objectives in mind. In fact, if you read the Sire white paper, they really do. They're aiming pretty high. They really want to be the cloud storage provider of choice across the internet. So another resource that I think is really good, and it probably makes me more inclined to invest in Sire and use Sire, is the roadmap. So this is something I think that lacks from a few different cryptocurrency products. There's a clear outline on their development plans going forward. So this is the roadmap here. You can see, relatively, you don't expect exact firm dates on a lot of these things. They usually never get filled anyway. But they do have a good outline of what they're fixing and what they've got planned for next releases that you can track. And so you can look at what they're planning to work on and then map that against the releases that actually come out and find out whether they're actually delivering on what they've planned. Another good thing about this is you can actually go back to previous releases and confirm that they've delivered on what they've said. So this is a really good way to work out whether the developers are serious or not. So I think this is really good. It's a really good way to also identify times in the future when you might see an increase in usage and price for Sire because of a release of new features and so forth. One other resource I want to talk about is the Slack channel. So this is actually pretty good as well. Another reason why I kind of like Sire and I'm inclined to get more involved with it. It's got 2,000 members at the moment, this Slack channel, and basically this is where you can post messages, post questions, and interact with the developers and other members of the community. There's quite a lot of activity on this. You can see here there's activity like just in the last few days. Lots of people asking questions. I mean, this is all just messages and interactions from today. So, whereas with other crypto, sometimes it's hard to get answers on different things. For the most part, you can throw a question in here and you'll get an answer within a few minutes or an hour. So this is quite impressive. The Slack channel is also where you can buy or sell something called Seer funds. So this is probably one of the last things I'm going to talk about with Sire today. But Seer funds are an interesting part of Sire. They were basically issued, I think there was perhaps 10,000 of them issued when the currency launched. About 8,000 of them went to the developers themselves. And they are all pre-mined, so there'll be no more Seer funds released. Now, Seer funds basically entitle you to, I think it's 3.9% of all contract proceeds go to holders of Seer funds. They get split evenly amongst people who have Seer funds. So it's almost like a bit of an ownership kind of contract, not quite, because it is an open source application, so it's not really like ownership and such, but it is an investment vehicle, I guess you would call it, for people to get involved with. Obviously, the developers have the vast bulk of them, but they are traded. This is where you can buy them, and I think there's one or two exchanges you might be able to buy them on as well. They're going for quite a big price at the moment. I saw some people in here asking for about 3 Bitcoin for one Seer fund. It's really a lifetime entitlement to 3.9% of the contracts that go through Sire. So I'm not sure how I feel about Sire funds. It's an interesting angle. It is only 3.9% of the proceeds of the transaction, so it's not a huge deal, I don't think. They are tradable, which is another important aspect. It means that anyone effectively can buy and sell these, so they're not being restricted in any way. So overall, I don't have a massive problem with it. And I think that the developers getting the vast bulk of them is really fair enough, and it's a way to motivate them to contribute and further develop and enhance the actual Sire application and system, because the more transactions, that occur, the more money they make from the holdings of those funds, or the more money they can make from selling those SIA funds down the track. Okay, so that just about finishes up this particular video. I've tried to cover most of the things that I think are relevant, that you need to know in order to make a bit of an informed decision about whether you buy SIA or invest in SIA coin. There are some other things I'd like to go into, and I might make a video down the track that covers that, specifically maybe a demonstration of hosting and a bit of a review of that, as well as a bit more on actually using the cloud storage and how effective it is, how quickly can you get to your files, the bandwidth, the actual cost, and so forth. Also, wouldn't mind looking at a comparative review of something like SIA with storage and maybe MadeSafe that offer similar types of services. In order to finish this one up, I'm just going to do a quick overview of SIA coin on a few different characteristics that I like to look at when considering whether to invest in a crypto or get further involved in it. One of the first things I look at is the overall purpose of the crypto. In this case, we're talking about decentralized digital storage. I think that's really good. I think SIA scores pretty strong on this front. There will be growing data requirements into the future. And many of these requirements are focused on images and video. Think about the evolution of video into further or higher definitions and resolutions. All people do these days is take photos and videos of themselves, and they never want to get rid of that stuff. So I think data requirements and data storage requirements are going to continue to grow and grow. Coupled with that is a growing emphasis on the privacy and security of that data. And SIA goes at least some way to trying to address that particular issue, especially when you think in terms of this emerging sort of mistrust of large legacy providers, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and so forth, and the uncertainty about what's actually happening with your data. So on this front, I think SIA does quite well. Competitors, another key aspect. Who are they competing against down the track, and where do they currently sit? Well, obviously they are competing against the big legacy providers into the future. They have a natural cost and privacy advantages over those. And when you think in terms of decentralized providers, the main ones that I'm aware of are Storage and MadeSafe. And I plan to do some videos on both of those shortly in the future. So although they do have a couple of competitors, there's not that many, and I feel like SIA's relatively well progressed as far as having a product that's up and running and actually functional. In relation to technical capability, now I will say that I haven't reviewed the technical capability in a high degree of detail here. I'm not going to comment on the security because that's something I'd prefer to look at in much closer detail. But from a high level, technically it seems to work pretty well. I think the UI and the application are actually pretty simple and friendly, and they do seem to work. You can upload files, you can add storage, you can enter contracts, and so forth. There are obviously big problems with scalability. So this is where the review is a little bit negative, because I feel like that's something the devs probably should have thought about. I guess my query is, if we get a much quicker surge in growth or another uptick in how many users are using SIA, will they be able to deal with that? And that's a big question, not just in relation to the transaction pool, but also into how many contracts they can actually efficiently manage at the one time. So that's something to think about. It might be rectified to some extent with coming updates, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And one of the most important aspects for me is the development drive. So will this product continue to get better? Will the devs, the guys who created it, had the original vision, will they hang around and keep working on the underlying code and really push it along for some time to come? I think it's pretty positive in this respect. It is open source, which always encourages contributions from outside. There's a really positive community and resources associated with this compared to other cryptos that I found quite refreshing, and it made it very easy to do the research and get across it. The roadmap is pretty solid. It looks like they've been delivering to some extent. They had their issues, they rectified them. They've got significant developments underway with the next update. The Sire Fund gives inherent motivation for development effort as well. And like I said, they've shown an ability to rectify problems and identify issues and then go and fix them, which is pretty good and fairly standard for cryptocurrencies. So that about sums it up. Thanks for listening. Really look forward to your comments and questions, and I'll try to answer them if you post them in the comments. And until next time, see you later.